In part one, we got to understand the lenses and how they work. Now it's time to get into how to choose the lenses that are best for your vision. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about the most common genres in photography and how to choose a lens that will best fit with your artistic vision. But before we do that, you have to ask yourself something that will play a huge role in what lenses you'll need for your project. Without knowing this first, and you go out and purchase a lens, 9 times out of 10, you'll end up with a lens that you don't need, and it's going to end up being costly down the road. Because if you don't need it or you don't like it, you're going to have to turn around and either return it, which in a lot of big department stores, you're going to end up having to pay shelving fees and return fees and that kind of stuff. So you're not going to get your full refund back. Or if you sell it private party, you're not going to get what the lens is worth, what you paid for it. So what is it that you need to know? Well, you need to know what your end goal or your final look is going to be. Without that, it's pointless to try and figure out what lens will best fit your project. So, what is your project? What is the end goal or look that you want to achieve? If you're doing a project for yourself, it's one thing. If you're working for a company or someone else, you have to get with their director, their art director, and see what vision that person or that company has. Know what your end goal is or your final look, and then let's talk about how to choose those lenses. We know a little bit about lenses. Now, let's talk about how to choose the one you need. What is your end goal or final look going to be? Again, I cannot stress this enough. You need to know it. Let's talk about portraits. I would argue that portraits, it's probably the #1 genre or subject of photography, right? A lot of people do it to pay bills, hobbies. Now, there are 2 basic categories for portraits. You have where everything is in focus, i.e. like a environmental portrait shot or a composite. And then you have another category where it's your subject's in focus and then your background is blurry. 2 different types of lenses there. Let's start with the all in focus, whether it's environmental portraits or your composites. We'll take a look at this one here. So this is a composite. The background was shot somewhere else. I took a picture of myself in my living room with a gray backdrop and a 3-point light system. I used my Sony a7R III with my 24-70 Sigma art lens. I shot it at 24 millimeters at f7.1 or f8. That gives me enough depth of field to make the composite or the illusion of where I'm actually standing in this location. On the other side, you have the blurry backgrounds. Now, to do that, you have to have a short telephoto to a long telephoto lens. Now, this will be about 85 millimeters and longer focal lengths, right? You have to have 3 factors to get that blurry background. And if you don't know those, I'll link my video up here on how to get very blurry backgrounds. So 2 of the 3 factors is aperture and focal length. So that's why you need to start at about 85 millimeters and then work to your longer focal lengths. To get those blurry backgrounds, you have to have a wide aperture. Therefore, 2.8, 1.8, 1.4, 1.2. Those are very wide apertures. That is what you need for the blurry backgrounds. That will separate your subject from your background. Your subject will pop out, and then you have that artistic vision if that's what you're going for. So those are the two types of lenses you'll need. Either a standard to wide angle lens for your environmental portraits, or your short to long telephoto lenses for your blurry backgrounds. So landscapes and cityscapes, I would argue, is the probably second most popular genre or subject of photography. So with landscapes and cityscapes, you have basically everything needs to be in focus. The only exception is if you're trying to isolate a particular tree or building or something like that, where you want that to be the focus and everything else is out of focus. Not very common. But with that said, most of your images are going to be all in focus. Now, here's where you can save a little bit of money, because they have two versions of lenses. So you have your more expensive lenses where it's the wider aperture, the 2.8, 1.8, 1.4, and so on. But they also make f4 versions, which are a little bit cheaper, also a little bit lighter, and tailored more for landscapes and cityscapes. Reason being is you can start at f4, typically about f11. You're going to stay within f8 to f11, basically, when it comes to landscapes. And remember, as I mentioned in part 1, diffraction starts right around f16. So stay about f11 and then focus on different areas of your frame, then take it to your editing software and then stack those images, and you'll get perfectly sharp images from front to back. All right, back to the lenses. So the f4 versions are perfectly acceptable. They are good lenses. They are sharp lenses. They will do the job. And a bonus, they are cheaper than the f2 or wider aperture versions of the lenses. Now, keep in mind, if later on down the road, you're gonna want to do portraits, not that you can't do it with f4 version lenses, because I have done it before. However, there are gonna be instances where you're not gonna be able to get that nice blurry background because you don't have the wide apertures. So just be aware of that. So for me, I actually started doing portraits first because, as I mentioned in part 1, the reason I even got into photography was to take pictures of my kids as they were growing up. So by then I had already started investing in the wider aperture lenses, the f2.8s, the f1.8, and then moved on to landscapes, which then I just used those lenses because they work just as for both portraits and landscapes. But the other way around, just be aware that it may not work. Cars and motorcycles are becoming very popular. People are spending a ridiculous amount of money on their cars and motorcycles, and they're gonna want pictures of it. It is growing in popularity as far as photography side of it, in being able to either make it a hobby or a full-time job, just photographing cars and motorcycles. You can also use the f4 lenses for these. However, there are going to be some detail shots or other things that some other shots that are going to come up that a wider aperture lens is going to be needed. Now, one workaround is have the f4 lenses, but the standard lenses or the wide angle lenses at f4, and then get yourself a macro lens. Now hear me out, I understand. That just doesn't make sense. A macro lens can be used not just for macro, but you can also use it for portraits or anything else. Before I had my 70 to 200, I had my 90mm macro. I actually used those for portraits before my 70 to 200. So you can use them for other subjects as well. You just have to back yourself up a little bit because it is a short telephoto. Now, on the other side of that, using your macro lens, it's beautiful for the detail shots that a lot of people get for those cars. Say the emblems or something about a tail light or a headlight that just is different from other cars and they want to accentuate or really bring that detail out. So you can use a macro lens to get those detail shots, and if you back up enough, you can get a general scene or an environmental scene depending on the room that you have to walk back and forth. Macro photography is just absolutely blowing up in popularity because there are so many types of magnifications and ratio lenses out there for macro. You have to determine what your subject is going to be, right? There's really only one look for macro photography, and that is your subject in focus. Everything else is going to be out of focus. And in most cases, if you don't do the focus stacking, even your subject is not going to be fully in focus. Knowing what your subject is going to be will determine what kind of magnification you get for your macro lens, right? So if you're going to be, for instance, doing insects, I would recommend that you get a 2:1 ratio macro lens rather than the 1:1, because the 1:1, your insects are going to be very small in your frame, and the whole thing is you want to make it bigger than life and the details and the beautiful colors and things in the insects. There is a 5:1 that I know of made by Laowa, but that's a 24 or 25 millimeter lens, which is a wide lens, but it'll allow you to get in very close. And then again, you have those 10 times to 50 time magnification lenses, which are for extremely small subjects like sand or salt or some kind of like powdered sugar, or just to get extreme details of things. So with that said, you have to know what your subject, what you want to shoot in the respect of macro photography, right? But if it's something that you're going to get into and possibly make a living out of, which it's not very high in popularity as far as I know for making a living off of it, but it can be done, then you're just gonna have to start investing in the lenses as you go along. Start with one particular subject, and then as you go, you can go smaller and smaller and then get those higher magnification lenses. Still life and products. This is a very, very popular subject because there are companies out there that need photographs of their products, right? Big brand name companies, even up to sometimes your mom and pops, smaller companies out there. Everybody needs pictures of their products. Typically, everything is in focus with an F, in focus with these types of pictures. So f4 lenses will work just fine. However, I would argue that even a macro lens will be needed for this type of photography, right? And the reason being is, like I said, I with my 90mm macro, I shot portraits and also used it for macro. With here, you can back up your lens and get a picture of your entire subject or your product, and then just focus in and start doing detail shots right there. And you don't have to worry about changing out lenses and taking time to, or taking time out of your schedule to do that. So f4 lenses will work just fine. Macro lenses will probably work even better. So think about what it is that you want to shoot as far as still life or products, and then you can determine the focal length that you'll need for your lenses. So say I helped out a local sewing shop here. It's family owned, and they wanted pictures of their products. Basically, there's spools of string, and then some of their sewing machines and that kind of stuff. My 24-70 worked just fine, and I even used my 90mm macro for detail shots of the string and a few of the machines. So those are options. Sports and action. Now this is definitely a popular subject. However, this one is a little bit harder to get into. One, two, I would argue is probably going to be the more expensive of the genres that we've talked about so far or coming up. The reason being is sports and action photography, you're going to need more than one camera body and more than one lens to be able to successfully capture the images that you need to either sell to a client, whether it's high school football, baseball, volleyball, you know, lacrosse, whatever, the soccer, whatever it is, or if you're going up to like college level or somehow tap into professional sports. Why do you need two camera bodies and two lenses? One, you're going to be in one position. You're going to tell you you can only stay here. This is your area to work in. You can't get out of that area. All right. So from that area to the end of the field or court or whatever else, you're going to need a telephoto lens. Then when the action gets closer to you, you're going to need a wider angle lens. You're not going to have time to take off the lens from your camera body, switch it out, put the other one on, and then get up and start taking pictures when the action gets close. You just don't have the time. It is moving extremely quick for you to be able to do that. Therefore, you have two camera bodies. One body will have your telephoto lens on it. The other camera body will have a wider angle lens on it. Now, typically, you're able to get away with one body having a 70-200 and then your other body having this super telephoto lens. Now here is the unfortunate part about this. Your 70-200, it is an investment. I'm not going to say it's not, but it is cheaper than what the lenses that you need for that super telephoto. Reason being is 9 places out of 10 that you go to, it's going to be low light and your camera and or lens is going to struggle with the autofocus. If you're going to be outside in the daylight, you're probably going to be okay with, say, like the 200-600 lens that I was mentioning in part 1 that I have, because it's a 5.6 to 6.3. At 6.3, I told you there's times where I struggle because there's just not enough light for the camera and or lens combination to lock on with that autofocus. So this is why I say this genre of photography is going to be the most expensive out of all the ones we've talked about or going to talk about. So one camera body with your telephoto, super telephoto, one camera body with a short telephoto or standard lenses like your 24-70, or maybe a, well, you're gonna need a 2.8 regardless. Like I said, a lot of those places have low light. You're gonna need to open up that aperture to let that light in. So if this is something you're interested in, this is gonna be where you can't really skimp on your lenses, because this is where the rubber meets the pavement. You're gonna have to have that wide open aperture, the wide apertures period on your lenses. Like I said, if you're just starting out, the 200 to 600 or maybe a 100 to 400 will work, but you have to be outside. There has to be a lot of light. If you're indoors in a stadium or like a volleyball court, basketball court, a lot of those, you just don't have enough light to have those lenses. Now the exception, and I don't know the other camera manufacturers, but Sony's A7S cameras are low light beasts, but they're only 12 megapixels. So you can't blow up the pictures very big. So depending on how you want to work that. But the standard, you're gonna need those more expensive lenses. There's just no way around it because of the low light factor. Okay, next subject, wildlife. This is a very, very popular, especially within the hobbyist community, where people are just out there enjoying nature, enjoying animals. There's also a very big audience as far as for work, as far as selling your images to magazines, to sport lodges, that kind of thing, where they have wildlife images up there. Now, without a doubt, you're going to need telephoto lenses, period. Telephoto, super telephoto lenses, you need the reach. Reason being, trying to get close to animals, one, it's going to scare them off. If they are predators, you don't want to get close to them. You're going to want those super telephoto lenses. Now, this is where you can start out with maybe a kit lens that has like 55 to 300 millimeter focal length, or whatever your particular camera brand has for that kind of telephoto. Other options are third-party lenses like Sigma that has a 150 to 600, I believe it is. I think now they have one that is just came out. It's a 50 millimeter to 600 millimeter. I believe it's a 5.6 to 6.3 lens, just like my 200 to 600. So third-party options are there for you, as well as the whatever camera manufacturer you have. But on top of, you can also use what they call teleconverters. And what that is basically a piece of glass that you put between your camera and your lens to magnify that much more. Now there are two types. There's the 1.4 magnification and the 2x magnification. Now, the 1.4 teleconverter, when you put it on, you'll lose one stop of light. If your lens is a 5.6 to 6.3, now it's going to close down. It'll close down your aperture in the sense that the amount of light coming in is going to be one stop less. So instead of a 5.6, you'll have an f8. Instead of a 6.3, it'll be like f9. So you'll have a f8 to f9, basically amount of light that's coming in. If you put a 2x teleconverter on it, you're going to lose 2 stops of light. So now you're talking f11, f13, which is, if you're in a low light situation as it is, your camera's not going to be able to focus because there's just not enough light coming into the camera in order to focus. So just be aware, You can use teleconverters as well with your super telephoto lenses to get that extra reach out there. Just be aware, those teleconverters will make you lose 1 or 2 stops of light, respectively. Cameras, well, that's going to be a different video, but telephoto lenses are a must. You can't use, not that you can't use wide angle lenses or your standard lenses. Those are going to be for environmental portraits of your animal with something else. However, you're going to have to get close to the animal, and almost always your animal will get scared off and you won't be able to get environmental portraits. So telephoto lenses are what you're going to need. All right, real estate. Real estate photography is on the rise, if not probably surpassing the other genres of photography. Right now, houses are going up like crazy. Real estate agents, real estate companies need pictures of their properties that they're selling. So this is a good genre to get into if you want to make money out of it. All you're gonna need are 1 wide angle lens and 1 standard lens. In real estate, just like landscapes, just like your environmental portraits, everything needs to be in focus, sharp focus from front to back, because the room or the house is the subject. That is what you're selling. So you have to make sure you take good shots. I could probably even argue you may need a macro lens to get some detail shots. Say, for instance, maybe some woodwork, like maybe they have a staircase and they have this elegant woodwork for the support, or maybe a fireplace that has wood, something to that nature. You could probably you might be able to get away with the 24-70, rack it to 70, zoom all the way into 70, and then use 2.8 and then try to crop in later. But I'm the type of person, get it right in camera and then do as less processing as you can later on. So I use the macro lens, get those detail shots. But those are really the only 2 lenses that you really need, is a wide angle lens, because there are going to be rooms in some houses that are going to be very tight. The wide angle lens gives it kind of that grand, like it gives it more space. And then your standard lenses for, your bigger houses, your bigger rooms, where you can use a 24mm angle of view and take good pictures. So those are really the 2 lenses that you'll need for real estate. All right, architecture. So architecture photography isn't as popular as it used to be, but they're still out there. Tilt shift lenses is really what you need for this. The other option, and I forgot to bring it, but I'll put a picture up here so you can see it, is a panoramic rail. And basically what that allows you to do is tilt up and down and then pan left and right, keeping the nodal point over your tripod, and then it reduces or eliminates any kind of parallax or distortion in your pictures. Sony doesn't have any architecture lenses, and I didn't really research it enough because 1, those lenses are more expensive, and 2, I found these panoramic rails that not only I can use for cityscapes and buildings architecture, but for landscapes where I do big panoramas, I can also use this rail. So the rail that I have is from Really Right Stuff, and I will link it in the description down there, as well as what the full price was, because it comes in two pieces. You have your regular rail where you just put it on your tripod and it's good for your left to right. But then this second section is so you can do tilts up and down, and then you'll be able to pan left and right as well. So it's a little bit of an investment, but it is most definitely cheaper than getting tilt shift lenses. Now, one caveat with that is with the panoramic rails, you have to spend the time to get the nodal point dead on. Only by doing that will you severely reduce or eliminate that parallax that creates the distortions. On the front end, it'll take a lot of time, but on the back end, once you get those pictures done, you can put them into your software, stitch them together, and then you're good to go. All right. So that is an alternative to the tilt shift lenses because, like I said, they are expensive. So the panoramic rail is something to go to. All right, everybody, we have covered a lot of information in this part 2 series. I want to hear from you guys out there. If you have any further questions before you go out to purchase your lenses, drop them in the comments below and I will answer them as quickly as I possibly can, so you're not delayed in purchasing whatever lens you need. If you have questions about things that I didn't cover either in part 1 or part 2, drop them in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. Let's build this community. Let's help each other out. So whether it's your next lens or your first lens, I'll be here to help as much as I can. I will answer those questions so you have peace of mind when you go out there to answer those, or when you go out to purchase those lenses. I also want to hear from you if you have a favorite lens that you already own, a go-to, and why is that your go-to lens? I'm curious to know. All right, everybody. That's it for this series. I hope you got a lot of good value and information out of it. If you did, consider hitting that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any other videos that will help you in the future. And if you want to change your camera settings on the fly, check out this video here. Until the next one, see ya.